There are few video game franchises as iconic and influential as The Legend of Zelda. The series has been reinvented more than most other franchises, introducing new and unique worlds and game mechanics you couldn't find anywhere else, and somehow the series has managed to be a runaway success time and again. The first game released on the Nintendo Entertainment System back in 1986 and was created alongside the original Super Mario Bros. Both games even had many of the same developers, Shigeru Miyamoto, who led design of both games alongside Takashi Tezuka, as well as Koji Kondo, the composer behind Nintendo's most iconic music. But, despite having many of the same lead developers, the two games were designed to contrast one another. Super Mario Bros. Is a very simple, linear game. It has no world to speak of. No, not one that you explore, I mean. It's just a series of levels. You beat one and move on to the next. There's a few secret paths to take, but the game is otherwise completely linear in its design. The Legend of Zelda, on the other hand, focuses on exploring a broad, open world full of secrets and full of danger. Mario's first level is widely considered to be one of the best opening levels in a video game for the way that it teaches players everything that they need to know to beat the rest of the game. You know, mushrooms are good, Goombas are bad, all the basics. But in The Legend of Zelda, you're dropped into Hyrule with nothing but a shield and are told to just figure it out, you little Okay, that's not entirely true. The NES edition of the game included a manual briefly explaining the gameplay and the story, and it also included a partial map of Hyrule to get you started. But there's the first problem. Modern games don't come with manuals anymore, and are instead expected to have in-game maps and tutorials to guide the player. Like many games from the 80s, The Legend of Zelda can be rather obtuse and nonsensical in design, especially by current standards. And even worse, Nintendo doesn't even make the map and manual accessible in modern ports of the game. Luckily, both have been preserved online, and I've linked them down below. Not only are these interesting pieces of gaming history to look back at, but I think it's only with the manual and the unfinished map of Hyrule that this game feels truly complete. This text crawl when you start is basically all the story there is to be told in-game, but with the manual, you get some more detail. Ganon, the Prince of Darkness, stole the Triforce of Power and used it to take over the land of Hyrule. Before getting kidnapped, the Princess Zelda broke up the Triforce of Wisdom and hid the pieces from Ganon. Zelda also sent her most trustworthy nursemaid Impa to find the man with the courage to piece the Triforce of Wisdom back together and use it to destroy Ganon. While on her search, Impa was attacked by Ganon's minions when a young boy appears from out of nowhere to save her. His name was Link, and this is where his story begins. The goal of this game is to find the 8 dungeons throughout Hyrule and retrieve the pieces of the Triforce hidden within. And this is where the map comes in. It reveals the location of the first few dungeons, as well as several points of interest that may help you to access them. Though it is possible to find everything on your own, the map gives you a sense of direction and makes the start of the game much less confusing. But as I mentioned, the map is unfinished and it only shows some of Hyrule's secrets. This will get you about halfway through the game, and after that you have to find your own way. But by that point, it's not unreasonable. Some secrets are still obscurely hidden, but you'll have developed an understanding of the game and its mechanics, maybe even found a few places not marked on the map to explore, and you'll have found some useful items to help you explore even more of Hyrule. The land of Hyrule is a broken, desolate place filled with Ganon's minions, and the people who once lived here are now hiding away from those monsters by living in caves and dungeons that are also filled with monsters. These last remaining survivors of Hyrule will give you some hints about where to go and what to do next. Much of this is optional, but it can still be very useful. They might point you in the direction of a hidden weapon upgrade, or maybe give you some vague hint on how to defeat a boss. It can be a bit odd, as they rarely tell you anything in a clear, straightforward manner, and others demand that you pay them for information, or even prove yourself before they'll help. Like, Hyrule has been taken over by evil, and I'm the only hope there is. Just give me the damn sword. The worst part about exploring Hyrule, however, is how many secrets are hidden with no indication whatsoever. Modern games have visual and audio cues to inform players of secrets and other interactable features, but the same quality of life standards didn't exist in the 80s. Here, you can bomb unmarked walls and find a hidden shop full of overpriced goods, or find a stairway leading underground beneath some random bush or boulder. The map can help with finding some of these, but if you don't know where the shop is, you might just end up bombing every wall on the screen looking for the entrance. And when I say these shops are overpriced, I mean it. If you're not an expert at the game, you'll likely have to grind for rupees a couple times throughout your adventure, especially if you want items like the blue ring, which can cut damage taken in half. It is incredibly useful, and the shopkeeper also demands your life savings for it. Exploring Hyrule can be very much worth it though. You'll find sword upgrades to increase your damage, the blue ring and magic shield to increase your defense, and heart containers to increase your health. You can also buy medicine to heal yourself when you're deep in a dungeon, and you're gonna need them with how hard this game is. The fields and dungeons of Hyrule are full of dangerous monsters, many of which became series regulars, like Keese, Darknuts, Stalfos, Lynels. There's some good enemy variety here, but the combat itself is pretty limited. Link can only move and attack in 4 directions, so you'll have to learn the different movement patterns of each enemy to space and position yourself appropriately. You can also find items in dungeons or shops to make these encounters easier. For instance, the boomerang can stun enemies in place, and the magic wand or the bow can attack from a distance, and these items allow the player to approach battles in different ways. Unfortunately, most of the difficulty here comes from fighting groups of enemies instead of making interesting enemy designs. Nothing in this game is more threatening and infuriating than fighting a room full of Wizrobes or Darknuts. Now, the last feature I want to discuss is arguably the most iconic of the series, dungeons. The manual refers to these as labyrinths, and that's a pretty good descriptor for them. They're all maze-like in design, and the later levels can be extremely confusing to navigate. Zelda games are largely known for their puzzles now, but there really aren't any puzzles to speak of here. Sometimes you have to figure out which block to move to open a door, but otherwise each room is made up of different combat encounters. The only real puzzle here is figuring out your way through the labyrinth to find the Triforce piece hidden within. It's the basic progression of these dungeons that made them iconic, though. Each dungeon includes a map and a compass to help show you where to go, small keys to open locked doors, a piece of equipment to aid you in combat or open up more of the world, and a boss guarding the Triforce piece. This simple design would be repeated and refined throughout the series, but what makes the dungeons in the original game stand out from the rest of the series is how you can complete these in almost any order you want. The dungeons are numbered, but that number really only indicates how complex or difficult they are. There's nothing saying you have to complete level 2 before level 3, but you do have to complete all 8 to open the final dungeon and confront Ganon. And once you do that and slay the Prince of Darkness, Princess Zelda is saved and the game is complete. Overall, The Legend of Zelda is quite expansive compared to other games on the NES. Most games at the time expected you to either beat them in one sitting, or leave the console on, or maybe enter a password to pick up where you left off. But that's not really feasible with how open-ended this game is. Instead, Nintendo developed a save system, making this the first NES game to have a save feature. While The Legend of Zelda has certainly aged since its release, this game is still pretty great to play nowadays, especially if you use the map and manual that came with it. It's incredible to see how many iconic tropes originated here, but also how many series tropes didn't originate here. There's no Hylian shield, no Master Sword, no annoying companion.
Hey, listen!
And no Triforce of Courage. Even without these, the game introduced so many features that Zelda is known for today. A wide array of items and equipment, dungeons full of monsters, hearts and heart containers, an open world full of danger and mystery, and a courageous hero to explore it all. In the end, The Legend of Zelda ended up becoming one of the best-selling NES games, with more than 6.5 million copies sold. So how did Nintendo follow up on such a successful game? By fundamentally changing everything that people liked about the first game, of course. Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link released roughly a year after the first game and was initially well received, though now it's typically regarded as the black sheep of the franchise. It has very little in common with its predecessor or its successors. While you do explore the overworld from a top-down perspective like Zelda 1, the rest of the game takes place from a 2D side-scrolling perspective, something that we wouldn't see from later Zelda games outside of brief sections in Link's Awakening. Okay, we don't talk about those ones. But Adventure of Link is in the black sheep of the series because of the side-scrolling perspective, though that does turn some people off. The game is just, to put it lightly, terribly designed. The story this time is that a magician put Princess Zelda under a spell to make her sleep forever, after she refused to reveal the secrets of the Triforce. To reverse the spell, Link must obtain the Triforce of Courage from the Great Palace in the Valley of Death. To open the Great Palace, Link must place crystals in each of the 6 not-so-great palaces hidden throughout Hyrule. To complicate matters, after his defeat in Zelda 1, some of Ganon's minions stayed behind in Hyrule and are now attempting to revive the King of Evil. Wait, is he the Prince of Darkness or the King of Evil? We're only 2 games in, and Nintendo already can't keep the lore straight. Whatever, I'm sure Nintendo will clear things up down the line, and everything will make perfect sense. To bring Ganon back to life, his minions will need the blood of Link, and they'll be hunting him down all throughout Hyrule. The moment you step off a main road, enemies will randomly spawn all around you, and you'll enter a little combat zone if you walk into one. Combat takes place from this side-scrolling perspective, and similarly to the original, it's all about spacing around enemy attacks by moving in or out of range or blocking attacks with your shield. But with this new perspective, you can now also jump over and duck under enemy attacks, and you can learn the upward and downward strike sword techniques. Each enemy has their own attack patterns requiring different strategies to overcome, making them all feel more unique than those from Zelda 1. You'll have to block or dodge attacks and wait for your opening to strike. There's a good degree of strategy to this, and finding the proper spacing and timing and then executing feels very satisfying when you pull it off. At least, most of the time it does. Sometimes the safe and effective strategy is rather boring to pull off, but to fight any other way just isn't worth the risk. This game is notorious for its high difficulty, and that's largely because enemies have brutal attack patterns with few openings to exploit. Darknuts in particular can be very frustrating to fight. With a well-timed jump slash, they're not too bad, but sometimes the level design doesn't allow for that, and fighting them otherwise is basically RNG. But don't worry, once you get the hang of fighting them, you then run into Darknuts that also throw daggers at you, and they're just bullshit. There's no pattern to their dagger attacks, you just better pray that you get good RNG. Many other combat encounters are just as frustrating. Sometimes you have enemies spawning right on top of you, others spawning right below you. Or they spawn right in front of you, but only after you jump, knocking you into a pit and instantly killing you. This happens all the time, and while the individual enemies are well designed, the setups around them are garbage to say the least. The random battles from the overworld aren't frustratingly difficult like this, but they do get repetitive and fast. It is possible to avoid these battles, but often these enemies will spawn directly in front of you with no way to avoid them. If you're not sure where to go, you'll find yourself constantly interrupted while trying to find your way. And God forbid you struggle in a palace, game over a few times, and have to make your way back through Hyrule. Yeah, for whatever reason, Nintendo implemented a lives system in this game. You start with 3 lives, and if you lose all 3, you start back at the North Castle where the game begins. And given this game's difficulty, that'll happen quite a lot, meaning you'll retrace your steps through the overworld and fight the same random battles over and over again. It gets so old so fast. And combat isn't all bad though. Boss fights can be very fun, at least when the hitboxes work. And when you don't get one shot. And when you're not fighting the last 2 bosses. But otherwise, this is where the combat shines. Spacing and strategy is key in these fights, and each boss has a unique gimmick to help them stand apart. I would also argue these battles are some of the more fair combat encounters in the game. With the exception of the Great Palace bosses, I almost always felt that dying was a result of my own mistakes, and I could use what I'd learned to do better on my next attempt. Another aspect of the combat system I haven't mentioned yet is the level up system. Adventure of Link is the only Zelda game to include experience points and level ups. Defeating enemies will earn you experience points. Defeating some enemies will earn you experience points, and once you earn enough to level up, you can increase one of your 3 stats: your attack power, your health points, or your magic meter. These stats level up independently, so you might, for instance, have enough experience to increase your health, but not your attack. Unfortunately, grinding for experience almost feels like a necessity in this game. You can still beat the game without maxing out these stats, but it makes later battles much more difficult and tedious if you don't. The Legend of Zelda was always defined by its open-ended world and its focus on exploration, but this level-up system really takes away from that. It was always exciting to find heart containers and sword upgrades in the first game as it made exploration feel so rewarding. While you can find health and magic upgrades in Zelda 2, it's much less exciting when most of these upgrades are tied to experience points instead. In fact, exploration as a whole is a letdown compared to the original. The first game lets you explore most of Hyrule from the very start of the game. The order in which you could complete dungeons was very flexible, and there were caves hidden all around Hyrule for players to stumble upon. Zelda 2 is more linear in all of those respects. Not only do you have to complete palaces in a specific order, but your ability to explore Hyrule is much more constrained. You can only wander a small portion of Hyrule at the start and must find certain key items to open up the other regions. There are fewer side areas to find and less exciting rewards for exploring there. Combat isn't the only tough thing about this game. Progressing through the world is a challenge too, and not in a good way. Inside the manual, you'll find another map, but this one is much less detailed than the one that came with the first game and is almost completely useless. To figure out where to go and what to do, you'll need to talk to everybody in the various towns throughout Hyrule. And I do mean everyone. There's nothing indicating who is important to talk to and who's got nothing to say. So you have to talk to everyone because some people will offer you important hints on what to do next. Like I said, some people. These hints can be genuinely important too, and it's even possible to miss some of them. Sometimes the only person that can tell you what to do next will be in their home, and you have to hope they just happen to come out when you're around so that you can talk to them. Other times the hints they give you are just confusing. There's this kid in Rauru who tells you, get candle in Parappa Palace, go west. Except Parappa Palace is to the northeast. I can't tell if this is a translation error or if the kid meant to say, get the candle, then go west. Either way, it's moments like these that make the game even more confusing to play than the first. There's also some vitally important places to explore that don't even show up on the map. To beat the game, you have to find Bagu. Bagu's home is found on some random tile in the forest, and there's no way you'll find this place without either a guide, luck, or just scouring every last tile on the map. Apparently, this sleeping choo-choo hints at Bagu's location, and I completely missed it because I didn't talk to him enough times while he was sleeping? What the fuck? Or there's the time that you have to find this mirror that's hidden under this table, but as far as I know, there is nothing in the game that hints at this, and there is no other time in the game that you need to check under a table for anything. Zelda 2 included several mechanics and ideas that never returned to the series, but it did introduce one thing that we've seen in many Zelda games since: magic. In each town you can learn a new magic spell. Some of these spells are used to defeat enemies in combat, others allow you to reach new areas, one can increase your defense and another can replenish some health. The magic system is a fine addition to the series, though its implementation leaves a lot to be desired. If you run low on magic while out exploring Hyrule, it can be a challenge to replenish it. Enemies sometimes drop magic pots, but it's not a common occurrence, and it's frustrating to find yourself unable to progress through a palace because you're out of magic and can't use a particular spell, which then forces you to grind through enemies in the hopes that you can find some. This is hardly the only Zelda game with this issue, but Adventure of Link is definitely the most stingy with magic, and that really hurts the pacing of the palaces where you need it the most. And speaking of palaces, their design is really lacking compared to the labyrinths of Zelda 1. Palaces still have keys and equipment to find, but there's no map or compass to help you along. Their layout is more confusing, and they all feel too big and repetitive. And then you have absolute nonsense like fake walls to walk through. Palaces are heavily focused on combat and feature many of the worst encounters in the game. Some enemies are smartly placed to keep progression interesting, but others spawn seemingly at random just to fill an otherwise empty room. Some enemies spawn endlessly and spam you with attacks until you escape or you die. Several of these encounters are just unfair and punish you for being unlucky instead of punishing you for making a mistake. The side-scrolling sections also incorporate a lot of platforming mechanics, but they're pretty underdeveloped. There's very little variety to the platforming itself, so the variety comes from enemies or hazards blocking your jump. Sometimes the goal is to block or dodge an enemy attack before jumping across a gap, other times you just stand and wait until the enemy kills itself, and sometimes the developers just intend for you to die by spawning enemies only after you jump. And this isn't uncommon either. This happens repeatedly. Platforming can be truly infuriating in this game. One wrong move and you're dead. So having said all that, is Zelda 2 worth playing nowadays? No, for most people there's really no reason at all to play this one. If you're really into NES or SNES games, then it might be worth a shot, but this game really doesn't have all that much to offer now. I really wanted to enjoy this one, but by the end I was damn near pulling my hair out just trying to be done with it. There's some good stuff here to be sure, but it's bogged down by so many awful design decisions that can make for such a miserable experience. In the end though, Adventure of Link was still critically and commercially successful, and it still has its fans today. There are even some amazing modern games that take inspiration from it, so for all its faults, I'm glad Nintendo tried to do something different here. It would be a few more years before Nintendo released another Legend of Zelda game, but this next one would define the series for the next 2 decades to come. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past was released for Nintendo's next generation of hardware, the Super Nintendo, and the Zelda team did everything they could to take advantage of this new 16-bit console. Better graphics and audio, more enemies with a more complex combat system, and not 1, but 2 Hyrules to explore. A Link to the Past goes back to the foundations laid by the first game, though it doesn't abandon everything that Zelda 2 brought to the table. Magic makes a return, and so does the Triforce of Courage, and, yeah, this is pretty much just a better Zelda 1. And from a purely analytical standpoint, thank God! The top-down perspective of the original makes a return. No more perspective change in combat or in town, and platforming is removed altogether, which is great because it wasn't any good anyway. There are no more dedicated combat areas, and combat instead occurs anywhere in the game world. You can expect to run into enemies throughout Hyrule Field or in dungeons, but someone in town may call the guards on you too. On a surface level, this game has some pretty dramatic improvements. Graphically, the color palette is more vibrant and varied than previous games. There's a wider variety of enemy and NPC sprites with far fewer repeats, and there are a lot more animations too, even for something as simple as Link pushing a block. The audio is of a much higher quality too, and there are many more songs than we got before. Koji Kondo made his return as the composer and outdid the already fantastic soundtracks of the NES games. A couple of these songs, like Zelda's theme and the Kakariko Village theme, would return in later entries and become some of the most recognizable and beloved songs in the series. The game is also full of little quality-of-life changes that make it much better to play than either of its predecessors. Link is now capable of moving diagonally, and instead of a forward stab attack with your sword, Link now swings with a slash, allowing the player to attack diagonally as well. Cracks now mark walls that can be destroyed with bombs. And where the original game came with a fold-out map of Hyrule, A Link to the Past instead has an in-game map you can pull up anytime in the overworld, allowing you to plan your way ahead. And, for the first time in the series, the story is told entirely in-game. The manual does include some added details, but it's mostly background information that isn't needed to fully understand the narrative. The game opens with the legend of a golden power hidden in a golden land, and the thieves determined to take it for themselves. One day, when an evil began to creep from that land into Hyrule, the king ordered the entrances to be sealed, and so they were. Our story begins with Link awakening to the voice of Princess Zelda asking for help. She says that she's been taken prisoner by an evil wizard, Aghanim, who is attempting to undo the seal between the two worlds. Link's uncle goes out for the night and says, "I'll be back by morning. Do not leave the house." But of course we leave anyway to go help the princess. We head out into the night, rain pouring and lightning flashing, a visual spectacle we never could have gotten on the NES. After finding a hidden passage to the Hyrule Castle basement, Link finds his uncle laying in the passageway. With his dying breath, he entrusts Link with a sword and a shield, and with these, we save the princess and flee through a hidden passage in the castle. Zelda tells Link that he must defeat Aghanim and save Hyrule, but to do so, Link must first obtain the legendary Master Sword. It's here that Hyrule Field opens up, and, much like the last two games, it's up to you to find your way forward. Within minutes, this game instills a sense of adventure in the player that few games had ever captured before, and that feeling continues throughout the entire game. A few hours in, Link is transported to the Dark World, an alternate form of Hyrule which was formerly the Golden Land but has now been corrupted by evil. This world mirrors Hyrule, but with some key differences. Hyrule Castle is now the Pyramid of Power, Kakariko Village is now a den of thieves, and where Hyrule Field was full of wildlife and patrolling soldiers, the Dark World is instead inhabited by unnatural and hostile creatures. The Dark World is more dangerous and difficult to navigate, but just as fun to explore and with many secrets still to uncover. Both worlds of Hyrule just come to life in a way that the first two games hadn't achieved. The residents of Hyrule now live in a village with homes instead of hiding away in caves or dungeons. Each character has something different to say, making them all worth talking to. Many of them will even have quests for you or hint at something to be found in the world. There are some nice touches too, such as the people of Kakariko Village calling the guards on Link or even just running away from him if he approaches. Now, this isn't some masterpiece of storytelling, and it would be outdone by other games, even in this same generation, but it shows clear improvement from the NES era, and the sense of adventure that this game evokes is absolutely timeless. This game is more than 30 years old, and to reach the Master Sword and pull it from its pedestal is still such an epic moment. Having the entire story told in-game not only gives you a more satisfying narrative without the need of the manual, but it makes progressing through the game much easier too. The first two games had characters who could hint at where to go and what to do, but many of these hints were cryptic, if not completely useless. A Link to the Past is much less vague, and it's entirely possible to finish this game without any outside assistance. Where the original Zelda felt more complete with the map and manual that originally came with the game, A Link to the Past feels like a complete game entirely on its own, meaning it's held up a lot better over time and is a lot easier to play for the first time nowadays. It's also a much larger game with far more items to collect. You have 24 pieces of equipment to find and use all throughout Hyrule, 24 heart container pieces that will get you an extra heart for every 4 that you find, 4 bottles that can store fairies and medicine, and upgrades for your tunic, sword, shield, and magic. This game also started the series' tradition of mini-games like racing the clock and shooting the targets. Hyrule is packed full of content, and it makes progression move along at a fast pace. There is always somewhere new to go and something new to find up until the game's final moments. Dungeons make a return, and their design this time around is easily the best of the series so far. In the first couple games, the dungeon layouts would be different, but thematically, they were all the same, just with different enemies and color swaps. Each dungeon in A Link to the Past, however, has a unique theme that sets it apart from the rest. One dungeon might take place in the desert, while another is covered in ice. You might climb a tower, or maybe explore a labyrinthine hideout for thieves. Dungeons in A Link to the Past also have a greater emphasis on puzzles. Much like the original game, you have to figure out how to navigate these maze-like layouts to get all the keys and get the dungeon item that opens access to new areas. These dungeons are much more complex in design, but also more logically designed. Nintendo likes to tease the player with treasures just out of reach, leaving the player to figure out the solution by themselves. This applies to the Overworld too, and can sometimes even require the player to switch between the Light World and the Dark World to get to their prize. It's a simple design philosophy, but it's also incredibly satisfying. And the equipment you find here is often useful for both combat and puzzle solving. The hookshot, for instance, can hit enemies from afar, but it can also pull Link across gaps in the floor. The hammer can deal with armored enemies, and it can also push pegs into the ground so Link can pass. The boomerang, arrows, and bombs are all weapons that can also be used to hit switches from across the room. Each item has multiple uses, and they each make the player feel stronger and more capable as they progress. Each dungeon has new enemies that you won't find in the others, with bigger, nastier bosses than ever before. Defeating each boss requires a different strategy, like figuring out how to break the Helmassar King's armor or exploiting Trinex's elemental weaknesses. Much like the storytelling, boss battles are more epic and memorable than anything the NES was capable of. The dungeons aren't without their flaws, however. Some dungeons are rather tedious and confusing to navigate, and others rely too heavily on magic. While magic is more plentiful in this game, the supply is still limited, and some dungeons will even warn the player to not even attempt the dungeon without bringing a magic potion first. It is nice that these potions are available to buy at any time, but it still kills the game's pacing to leave a dungeon, go all the way to the shop, buy some potions, and go all the way back. It's just tedious and time-consuming, and unfortunately, it would be a while before Nintendo figured out a solution to this problem. Once all the dungeons are completed, Link confronts the wizard Aghanim again. However, defeating him in battle still isn't the end. Ganon appears in the form of a bat and flies away to the Pyramid of Power. It's there that Link has his final battle, and upon defeating Ganon, the game is finally complete. A Link to the Past is a remarkable game, one of the most well-designed and timeless that I've ever played. I grew up on later Zelda games, specifically Link's Awakening and Ocarina of Time. I was a bit older when I finally gave A Link to the Past a real chance, and even then I wasn't all that into it. But now, having played through the first 3 games one after another, I feel a newfound appreciation for A Link to the Past and what it brought to the table. It introduced some iconic music to the franchise, it began the series' trends of mirrored worlds and puzzle-filled dungeons, it brought us the Master Sword, and it perfected the formula that would define the next 2 decades of Zelda games. This game is a masterpiece in every sense of the word. Early on, Nintendo seemed unsure of the direction they wanted this series to take, and it led them to reinvent the franchise more significantly than they had with their other major titles. But despite the weird turns this series took, The Legend of Zelda is thriving more than ever before, and it's safe to say that all these steps were necessary to get the series to where it is today. Thanks for watching.